Welcome to the February edition of What's in Bloom at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. Each month, we put together a selection of plants that are in bloom in that particular month and make a handout for our garden visitors highlighting those plants. So, we're going to go over some of those plants that are on the February list for things that are in bloom now. So, starting out, we have this wonderful plant, which is Mahonia Harrisoniana, also known as Berberis Harrisoniana. And this is a very rare plant that comes from the valley of the lower Colorado River along the border between Arizona and California. Most of the known plants are on the Arizona side of the border, but this one was propagated from a cutting off one from the California side. And like other Mahonias, it has very prickly leaves. It grows in shady canyons, not in full sun, but it's a very hot desert location where it grows. So this is our first time growing this plant. We got it from Tilden Gardens, and it's, as I said, propagated from a cutting from a plant collected at the locality in California. So this is our first time flowering it, and we're very proud that it seems to be doing so well. It's a low shrub. Actually, it can get several feet tall, but ours is less than 2 feet tall. But looking very beautiful with these yellow flowers just starting to bloom now. Mahonia Harrisoniana. Here we have an agave hybrid, which I made some years ago. It's a little bit of an effort to do these things because you have to get a step ladder and get the pollen from one plant and then put it next to the other plant and get up there and apply the pollen. And then a few months later, go back and collect the seed. And so that's what we did to get this. Now, here we have a nice blue compact agave setting up its stalk and coming into flower in the middle of the winter. Well, what's going on here? Usually our agaves bloom in the summertime. And usually when we do get an agave blooming in the winter, it's an agave from farther south in southern Mexico or Central America, where there's less winter cold to worry about than there is in the north. But that's not the case with this agave. Both of its parents are from northern Mexico and would not bloom in the wintertime. So why is this one blooming in the wintertime? Well, the answer is that one of its parents, Agave parrasana, has a two-stage flowering process. So it starts blooming in the fall of one year and goes partway up and then stops, waits out the winter, and then resumes in the spring and actually comes into bloom. The other parent is Agave colorata, which does not do that. It just blooms continuously starting in the spring. So this one started to bloom in the fall in accordance with the Agave parrasana parent, but then it didn't stop because of the other parent interrupting that pause cycle. So it went on ahead and flowered in the wintertime when neither parent would flower. But it's very nice for us to have this beautiful display of red and yellow flowers in the middle of winter. Both of the parents have red buds open into yellow flowers, so consequently the offspring does too. And looking quite nice here in late January, and a wonderful thing to see when you come to visit the garden in February. Agave parrasana ex colorata. Pelargonium is a large genus in the geranium family with many species found in South Africa. It's a common genus seen in the nursery trade, but in the nursery trade, usually they're called geraniums. And so what we see as florist geraniums are usually pelargoniums and not geraniums. But the flower on Pelargonium is asymmetrical, whereas that in geranium is symmetrical. Geraniums are a wholly different group of plants. This plant here is Pelagonium Carnosum, and it's notable for being one of the succulent pelargoniums. So it has big, fat, succulent stems, and actually some succulents in the leaf as well. The leaf is heavily dissected and very ferny looking, wonderful appearance. And here it is just coming into flower now. The flowers are quite small, but quite wonderful too. And a lot of them coming, but just a few open at present. So Pelagonium carnosum comes from southern Namibia and the western arid part of South Africa, where it's winter rainfall region. So it does well here in California with our winter rainfall climate, and bursts into growth in the wintertime and then comes into flower as it's doing now. Pelagonium Carnosum. This plant here is an aloe that's the result of my hybridizing efforts. It's Aloe Creamsicle, and it's a hybrid between Aloe ferox and Aloe arborescens. Both of these species are common plants in South Africa with big distributions, and in a number of places they co-occur, and where they do, sometimes hybrids result. But usually the normal flower color for both species is in the red to red-orange range. And, and I wanted to make a yellow version. So there is a yellow version of both plants, but much less commonly encountered. So I took the pollen from a yellow ferox and put it onto a yellow arborescens to make seeds. Well, the result didn't come out to be exactly yellow. It came out with a sort of a pale orangey yellow color. And so we named it Aloe Creamsicle. And here it is just beginning to bloom. The advantage of the hybrid is that you get the branched inflorescence from Aloe ferox, but the multi-headed large clump of heads from Aloe arborescens. So it really makes a lot of flowers and really puts on a show. Aloe Creamsicle. I always like to make note that it isn't only the flowers that make the Ruth Bancroft Garden a wonderful place to visit. There's lots of other things to notice, and one of the wonderful things is the way that light catches on the hairs and the spines on some of the cacti. This one here is an Oreocereus called the Old Man of the Andes that comes from South America. But there are many other plants too that catch the light like this. And the morning and the late afternoon are wonderful times because the horizontal angle of the sun really makes things glow. And I just think that's wonderful. The Bromeliaceae, or Bromeliad family, is a large monocot family from the New World. So they do occur in North America, especially in Mexico, but the greatest number of them are from South America, where we presume the family originated. And this is one that sort of grows like a living boulder, has many, many heads and heaps up over time. And its original name was Bromeliad brevifolia. There's a related group of plants that have larger heads and a taller, wiry inflorescence called Deuterocohnia. And so for a long time, this was a Bromeliad, and those long-stemmed ones were Deuterocohnia. But then they discovered plants that were in between and realized that the closeness of this and the Deuterocohnias was such that this ought to be included in Deuterocohnia. So now we call it Deuterocohnia brevifolia. In any case, the little heads are very stiff and sharp, so it's a very pokey plant, but it has this wonderful mounding habit and interesting green flowers that stick out between the leaves and are almost the same color as the leaves, so you really have to look twice to see that it is in flower. Now, this seems to me an odd thing to have a flower that's the same color as the leaf. Usually you want your flower to stand out so the pollinator will notice it. So it's unusual to have the leaf and the flower be the same color, but that's the way this one does it. And the hummingbirds seem to find it just fine, so I guess they know what they're doing. A Bromeliad or Deuterocohnia brevifolia. The genus Kalanchoe belongs to the Crassula family or stonecrop family. And while there are species that come from Africa, there are many more that come from the island nation of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean. And that's where this one comes from. This is Kellen Koi Marnieriana. So it has blue-green paddle-like leaves with a little bit of a purpley red rim to them. And it's quite wonderful all by itself when it's not in bloom, but when it comes into bloom, all these wonderful pastels come into play. There are oranges and yellows and lavenders, and it really is a feast of subtle coloration. So worth a close look, and it's really making a lot of flowers right now. Kellen Koi Marnieriana. That brings us to the close of our February edition of What's in Bloom at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. But I want to remind you that there are a lot more things going on in the garden than we can put in one little video. And so it's always great to come to the garden and see for yourself what's going on. There are lots of plants that come into bloom briefly, but not long enough to make it onto our What's in Bloom list, and others that just don't fit because we can only fit so many plants in 1 month's What's in Bloom. There are things that show promise of something to come, like this inflorescence emerging on the agave here. And there are things that we know are going to be glorious later on, like this puya with its amazing purple flowers. So every season has something special here at the Ruth Bancroft Garden. And if you can't come in person yourself, well, you can always go to our website and see some of our offerings, like the What's in Bloom videos, like the plant highlights, and various other things that we post on Instagram and YouTube and so forth. And then we have lots of educational offerings, like classes that you can attend as well. So check it out when you get a chance. The Ruth Bancroft Garden.